Have you ever had that feeling? That unsettling sense that you're not alone, even when you're in your own home? The creak of a floorboard upstairs, a shadow flitting past the corner of your eye. For most of us, it's just our imagination. But for one family in 1920s Germany, that feeling became a horrifying reality. This is the story of a place called Hinterkaifeck, an isolated farmstead that became the stage for one of the most chilling and perplexing unsolved crimes in history. A crime so bizarre, it feels like it was ripped from the pages of a horror novel. But this was all too real. Imagine a small, remote farm, miles from the nearest town, surrounded by dense woods. This was Hinterkaifeck, home to the Gruber family. The patriarch was 63-year-old Andreas Gruber, a stern and reportedly difficult man. He lived with his 72-year-old wife, Cecilia, their widowed daughter, 35-year-old Victoria Gabriel, and Victoria's two young children, 7-year-old Cecilia and 2-year-old Joseph. The farm was their entire world, a self-contained universe of hard work and rural isolation. In March of 1922, a new face arrived. Maria Baumgartner, the family's new maid. She couldn't have known she was stepping into a death trap. Her predecessor had quit months earlier, claiming the house was haunted. At the time, it might have sounded like a fanciful excuse. In hindsight, it was a chilling premonition. In the days leading up to the tragedy, the fabric of their isolated life began to unravel in strange and terrifying ways. Andreas Gruber, not a man given to flights of fancy, confided in his neighbors about a series of disturbing occurrences. It started with a set of footprints. In the freshly fallen snow, a single track of footprints led out of the dense forest straight to the farmhouse. But there were no tracks leading back. It was as if someone had walked out of the woods, entered their world, and simply vanished into the property itself. Then came the noises. At night, the family would hear strange footsteps coming from the attic. Andreas would search, but he never found anyone. The sounds persisted, a phantom resident walking above them as they slept. The unease grew. A set of house keys mysteriously disappeared. Then, a newspaper from Munich appeared on the porch, a paper no one in the family had bought or subscribed to. It was as if someone was toying with them, leaving clues that they were there, watching, living in the shadows of the family's own home. Who was this unseen intruder? A vagrant seeking shelter? A thief casing the property? Andreas was deeply unsettled, but he made a fateful decision. He didn't go to the police. Perhaps he thought he could handle it himself. Or maybe he feared being seen as paranoid. Whatever his reason, he and his family remained alone, isolated with their growing dread. They had no idea that their time was running out. The last day of March 1922 began like any other at Hinterkaifeck. Maria Baumgartner, the new maid, arrived to start her first day of work. The family went about their chores, but as dusk settled over the farm, a monstrous plan was set into motion. The killer, who had likely been living on the property for days, even weeks, finally made their move. The attack was brutally systematic. It's believed the killer lured the family members one by one into the barn. First Andreas, perhaps drawn out by a noise with the livestock. Then his wife, Cecilia, likely going to look for her husband. Then Victoria, and finally her 7-year-old daughter, also named Cecilia. Inside the barn, in the dim light, each was met with unimaginable violence, struck down with a mattock, a heavy farming tool similar to a pickaxe. 4 members of the family, silenced in the very place they worked every day. But the horror wasn't over. The killer then walked from the barn back into the quiet farmhouse. Inside, 2 innocents remained. The new maid, Maria, was slain in her bedchamber, and in his crib, little 2-year-old Joseph was also murdered. 6 people, an entire family, wiped out in a single brutal evening. The house fell silent, but it was not empty. This is where the story takes a turn from a tragic murder into the realm of pure nightmare fuel. The killer didn't flee. After committing these horrific acts, the perpetrators stayed. For several days after the murders, life on the farm seemed to continue, at least from a distance. Neighbors noticed smoke curling from the chimney, suggesting someone was keeping the fire going for warmth and cooking. The farm animals, including the cows and chickens, were fed and cared for. Inside the house, investigators would later find that food had been eaten from the kitchen. The beds had been slept in. The killer had made themselves at home, living amongst the bodies of their victims. Think about that for a moment. This individual wasn't just a murderer, they were a phantom inhabitant. They had the audacity and cold-blooded nerve to not only slaughter an entire family, but to then live in their home, eat their food, and tend to their farm as if nothing had happened. This element transforms the crime from a simple act of violence into a profoundly disturbing psychological puzzle. What kind of person could do this? What was their motive? Was it robbery, revenge, or something far darker and more incomprehensible? The killer was comfortable there. They knew the farm. They treated it like it was their own. For 4 long days, no one knew what had happened. The family was known to be reclusive, so their absence wasn't immediately alarming. But when young Cecilia didn't show up for school for several days, and the family missed church on Sunday, concern began to grow. On April 4th, a search party of neighbors decided to investigate. They walked up to the silent farmhouse. The scene they discovered was one of utter devastation. They found the bodies in the barn, and then the others inside the house. The police were called, and one of the most extensive and frustrating investigations in German history began. The investigation was massive. Over the years and decades that followed, more than 100 suspects were questioned. Theories were abundant. Was it a drifter? A scorned lover of Victoria's? Some even suspected Carl Gabriel, Victoria's husband, who was believed to have been killed in World War I, had secretly returned to exact some terrible revenge. But his death in the trenches was later confirmed by his comrades. Suspicion also fell on a neighboring farmer, Lorenz Schlittenbauer, who had a complicated relationship with the family. He was part of the initial search party and had acted strangely at the scene, but no concrete evidence ever tied him to the crime. He remained a primary suspect in the public's eye for the rest of his life. Every lead turned into a dead end. Every theory crumbled under scrutiny. The murder weapon, the mattock, was found in the barn. But in the 1920s, forensic science was in its infancy. There were no fingerprints, no DNA. The killer had seemingly vanished, leaving behind only questions and a lingering sense of terror. The heads of the victims were even sent to Munich for examination by clairvoyants, a desperate move in a case that defied all logical explanation. It yielded nothing. Eventually, the case went cold. In 1923, the year after the murders, the farmstead of Hinterkaifeck was completely demolished, erasing the physical location of the crime as if to wipe the memory from the landscape. But the story refused to be buried. To this day, the Hinterkaifeck murders remain officially unsolved. It's a true ghost story, a tale of an unknown evil that emerged from the woods, infiltrated a family's home, and lived among them before brutally extinguishing their lives. The idea of an intruder not just breaking in, but moving in, is what makes this case so uniquely terrifying. It preys on our most fundamental need for safety and security in our own homes. Who was the phantom of Hinterkaifeck? We will likely never know. Their identity is lost to time, but the chilling story they authored continues to haunt us, a stark reminder that sometimes the greatest monsters are the ones we never see coming. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into one of history's most unsettling mysteries. If you find these kinds of stories as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content. Let me know in the comments what you think happened at Hinterkaifeck. I'd love to read your theories. Stay curious and stay safe.